excuse the delay. We were having a few technical issues, but I hope they're solved. Please turn your cell phones off and don't fiddle with them during the program because there's a lot to enjoy. Thanks so much for coming to tonight's program featuring a true embarrassment of riches for one evening. Fiction editor for the New York Times, Deborah Treisman, is delayed. She's in the air. She will try to race here, dash in here. She's coming from Newark, so like, oi, oi, oi. For somebody so brilliant, how could she go out of Newark? Anyway, but we have George Saunders. Oh, he's over there. Sorry, we have Jon Cryer, we have Richard Kind, and we have Kerry O'Malley, and they're going to be reading great stuff. So they will make the stories from the New Yorker come alive. I am Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Bloc, and we're now in our 29th season. Thank you. I want to thank my friends here at the Ebell for making this most fabulous, gorgeous room available to us tonight. They're a membership organization that's enhanced the life and culture of Los Angeles for over 100 years, built by women, for women, and they want your membership. And they treat me really well, so I always say that. Okay. Now for tonight, you all understand about airline travel, so you're all going to forgive poor Deborah because she flew out here for this, and her book is so ridiculously magnificent. It's such an achievement, and you'll see that as we move along. I can't imagine the agony or the ecstasy of being the fiction editor for The New Yorker. Can you imagine the weekly Sophie's Choice she must confront? We're here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of our favorite magazine. And Deborah has sat in that fiction editor's chair for 22 years. As the fiction editor, she has combed through 100 years of fiction. That's more than 5,200 stories, I think, to include in a most magnificent collection. The book, A Century of Fiction in the New Yorker, is a sort of time capsule of American life and letters. We're familiar with many of those writers, lucky enough to make the grade, including our own George Saunders, winner of the Booker Prize, the National Book Award, and countless other prizes. I mean, he wins the O. Henry Prize and the Magazine Writers Prizes. I mean, they're every 5 minutes. So his stories bend genres as they contemplate compassion, humanity, and loss, and he makes us laugh while he does it. If you're not familiar with other authors in the collection, spend the time to check them out. It's a massive achievement, as I said. And in Deborah's absence, I'm going to chat with George for a few minutes about his experience with the magazine. As promised, we've got a trio of wonderful actors to read 3 stories, which Deborah selected. There's not a person in this room who hasn't said, "Oh, I love Richard Kind." You've loved him. You've loved him on Curb. Oh, okay. You've loved him on Curb and Mad About You and A Serious Man and 1,000 other movies and TV series. Jon Cryer played the perfect and hilarious foil to Charlie Sheen on 2.5 Men, and Kerry O'Malley is currently filming the Netflix hit The Man in the Inside and was most recently in Nightbitch and The 688. So, George Saunders is going to come up here right now. And you sit there. Thank you. And Jesse will keep, when the readers come up, Jesse will keep coming back and forth with the apparatus, right. Okay. The music stand, that's what it's called. It's been a long day. Yeah, exactly. Okay, George, you are in the New Yorker all the time.
Not as much as I'd like.
Not enough, okay. How many, and I forgot to mention, he just wrote a great piece in the New York Times in the opinion section on the Librarian of Congress, I believe. Yeah. The one-time Librarian of Congress.
And hopefully again.
Hopefully again. Yeah. Sooner rather than later. Okay, so how many stories have you had in the New Yorker?
I'm not sure. I think 20-ish, or maybe. I started with Deborah in 2003.
Okay, hold the mic closer.
Okay.
Okay. And so you were first published in 2003, and who was your editor then?
Well, I actually published before that in 92.
Oh, in the New Yorker.
Yeah, and Deborah came in 2003, so we've worked together since then. Yeah. I was living in Amarillo, Texas, and working as a groundsman in an apartment complex, writing stories. And this was when everything was hard copy. So I sent my story, to the New Yorker. And in probably 86, I was 25, got a letter back. We'd like to publish your story in the New Yorker. Would you consider changing the ending? I was like, no, you elitist New York bastards, no. And I said no. And then a year later, I published it in a small magazine and changed the ending. But so but I kept sending to them, and finally in '92, I got the coveted prose rejection. It wasn't just a single word no. It actually had an explanation, and it was it was like winning an Oscar. It was so great, like, oh my God. And I was working at an engineering company, and I was so tickled that I brought the letter in and showed it to my boss. And he was like, and this was, I think, the first usage of this construction. He said, yeah, George man, we're gonna request that you stop using corporate resources to do your literary thingies, So that was in 1991, a good, like a wordy rejection.
Was it a personal rejection?
Yes.
It explained to you something about your story,
Yes.
why it was rejected?
Yes, a guy named David McCormick, who was an assistant to Daniel Menaker, who was then in Deborah's role, read it very carefully and explained why it wasn't for them, but it admired it, and that magic phrase, please send more, he didn't say tomorrow, but that's kind of, so then in those days, that was a huge thing to get a personalized rejection, because there was no email, they had to, mail it, and very encouraging. And it took me 3 more stories, and then I was on an engineering trip up at Fort Drum, doing soil sampling, came back to the glamorous Microtel, and there was a note from the receptionist, very sweet. She said, like, Mr. New Yorker says yes, or something like that, So
How did she know?
They called.
Oh,
my
called.
wife had
I
given
thought
them
she'd
the
opened
number
the
of the
letter.
Microtel in case the New Yorker accepted it, and then they did. So that was a big deal, and my wife, at that time, and I think now, my agent told me that to get a story in the New Yorker is a bigger deal than having your first novel published. It's more rare. Fewer people do it. So that night, my wife, when I got back to our home, my wife had gone around to every dentist office and looted all the New Yorkers and made this beautiful kind of Tibetan prayer flag out of New York. So it was a big deal. So that was '92. I published a few things. Deborah came on board in 2003, and we worked on a story called John at that time. And we just, she's the best, And in a way, I'm glad she's not here, because I can praise her more effusively than I could have otherwise.
Yeah, I wonder because I believe she gets 300, I read that she gets 300 stories a week.
Yeah, she is so generous. She'll see our Syracuse students. They go to New York. We had a donor who allows them to come to New York and meet some people. She sits down with them, and she told me the number. It was something like 300. And I thought, how in the world do you do that? And then do this anthology on top of it is kind of, and how do you not lose your sort of love for fiction or your choosing mojo? That's one of the things I wanted to ask her tonight. She's incredible.
Well, I hope she gets here in time for you to be able to do that. I hope United Airlines.
Yeah. But really, she's. Being in the New Yorker is a wonderful experience for many reasons. But for me, it's working with her. Like taking a story that I'm completely obsessive about my stories, and I edit them and revise them. And when I send it, that thing is perfect. Then the edits come back and there's marks on it, And I spent a day going, oh, Deborah lost her mojo. She forgot that story was perfect. And then then I had the discipline of looking at the first page, and you go, oh, well, that's pretty good. Oh, that's real. Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. And you're just so grateful that she's in your corner, you know.
Has her editing of your stories changed in the 22 years? Has she gone easier on you? Have you learned?
No,
You know?
no. And one of the things that she told me once, she told the students this, is that part of her job is to protect her writers by not accepting stories that don't advance their work. So my God, you know, as you start to get a reputation in anything, people start coddling you. So it's an incredible gift to have somebody say, you didn't quite get it. You haven't hit your standard here, you know. I don't think she's changed. I mean, it was funny. I worked with her predecessor, Bill Buford, and he was a really good editor. I felt like it was pretty seamless. And it's just like we kind of go into a bit of a mind meld. And she's a very, I would say, ego-free editor. So some editors, and I'm sure people have had this experience, it becomes a fight right away. I said it's a semicolon. Well, it is, and it's very kind of a fight. You know, you have to give this to get that, and there's a feeling of your story being taken away from you. Deborah, it's never like that. She makes, first of all, 80% of her suggestions are so good that you just go, oh, wow, how did I miss that, you know? But in the ones where there's a little bit of contention, my experience is she yields at first, right away. Oh, okay. Then the next pass, if that day it still feels that way, she brings it up again. If you still resist, she'll drop it. But the thing you know is she's always trying to give you her best. Even if she has to be, you know, kind of come in a little around the fence to remind you again. I get the feeling that we're like two surgeons, you know, over a patient. And it's not really my patient anymore. We're there together. And
Well, aren't you the patient?
No, it's the story.
Oh,
The story.
okay.
I'm out of it.
Okay.
You know, I did my best. The story is there, and we both want that sucker to get up and walk. You know, because the beautiful thing about the New Yorker is it's going out next week to everybody that likes literature. You know, so you're mutually trying to get the thing to breathe, and whether the suggestions coming from my side or her side, we just And by the end of it, we're so locked in that sometimes I'll get up in the morning and she's emailed me the exact change I emailed her overnight. Or she'll say, you know that bit about the canary? I know. And then we'd make the cut. I mean, it's just kind of like a strange, beautiful experience.
So she doesn't edit you any differently now in 2025 than she did in 2003.
Not that I can feel.
That's
It's almost like her ear is really, really tuned. Well, and it's tuned to mine. And I've learned that like if you take your ambient prose style, the way you just write, for me to aim for the New Yorker, which is kind of a popular, you know, entertainment sort of thing, that helps me get to the right sort of like prose body weight. And her reading of me has always helped me do that. You know, lots of beautiful little trims that I've missed 9,000 times, and she finds it. You know, but I don't. It's an interesting question. I don't think she's changed. You know.
So the New Yorker is one of the only publications, one of the only mainstream publications. Harper's, and the Atlantic, they publish stories, but so few publications publish short stories on a weekly basis. Why?
I don't know. I wish they did. And I'm just so grateful that, I mean, you know, the way things are now, you start to really treasure the things that are good, that have not been taken away yet. And the New Yorker, in general, is one. But the New Yorker's attention to fiction is just I mean, it really is a blessing. And I'll tell you why, and I'll maybe relate it to politics a little bit. When you work on language the way that Deborah does, and that if you're fortunate enough to be her writer, you do, you learn the value of, first of all, specificity, velocity, and truth. You know, a short story really kind of thrives on those things. When you get in the habit of regarding prose with those qualities in mind, you find that your intelligence goes up. You know, in other words, you're not bamboozled. You're not generalizing. You're certainly not generalizing and insulting anybody. The form requires you to be precise and therefore truthful. if everybody was involved in that, and everybody here is by being readers and writers, I think that the national intelligence comes up. And this tendency to sort of demonize groups and sort of make these big sort of cruelty-laced generalizations, fiction will train that right out of you because it doesn't sell in a story. If I say, all those red-haired people are jerks, you don't believe it. You know, I haven't proven it. So I think it's an important discipline. I'm just really glad I get to be in there with her, relearning it every time.
So is writing a short story is a little world unto itself that's precise and concise, and as you say, has velocity. Is it a lot harder to crank out a short story than it is to write a novel? And by crank out, I mean, write.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've only written one novel, and my wife says it's. She says, I don't know. It's a lot of blank space in that baby, you know. So, I think a story has a very. It's like a joke. You know, a joke is a joke harder than an essay. Well, kinda, because when you get to the end of a joke and it doesn't work, everybody knows it. You know, and what a joke does is kind of ineffable, and you can have reams of theory about how a joke works and still not be able to tell one. So a story, I think that the beautiful thing is, I think the way they work is, we all know that we're reading along to find out X, like in Joyce's A or B. We're reading to find out if he'll make it to the bazaar and buy the thing for the girl he likes. Okay, that's fun. That's old-time human stuff, will he or won't he? We find out that he makes it a little late and doesn't have enough money. That's a pretty good story. But underneath it all, there's been something else going on that I don't think even Joyce knew about as he was writing it. And he calls it the epiphany. I call it the understory. So something's been going on in our relation to that little boy that it's sort of over here. And in the last few lines of that story, where he's humiliated, his own hubris, you know, that comes up through the story, and we go, oh, that's what it was about all along. So that's a pretty subtle thing, and it takes a long time to learn how to do it, and even when you learn how to do it, you can't do it reliably. That's hard. And I think novels are maybe a little more tolerant because we are kind of involved in just like anecdotal storytelling, but the story has to do, like a joke, a very specific bit of magic that is not guaranteed to anybody ever.
I'm going to get to our wonderful readers and talent in a moment, but I just have a few more questions. Do you feel, you've worked with her for 22 years and you publish elsewhere, you know, in other rags, and other great publications. Do you feel that you know what she wants or not necessarily? Do you have any prediction if she'll grab this one? How does that work?
Well, this is kind of a easy answer, but she wants me at my best. And of course, I always think I'm at my best, you know. Right. So I'll send her something kind of like convinced, and she'll gently turn it back. And in that moment, I go, oh yeah, no, that's right. So the thing is, I've never been in a spot where I thought she's wrong. I just thought, oh, I sent it too early, you know. So that's an incredible gift. I mean, it's like having if you're a tennis player, having a backstop that always hits the ball back to you perfectly, you know. So I think it's maybe, my guess is other writers would have a different experience. In other words, some writers shouldn't try to be in the New Yorker because their style is different. But for me, South Side of Chicago, basically an entertainer, it's perfect because it encourages that quality in me and a kind of concision, you know.
And here's sort of an obvious question, but what impact did getting that first story published in the New Yorker have? Was it incalculable? Was it?
It's just, I mean, on a practical level, it's just life-changing because suddenly I had a letter from an agent, you know, and I was working in Rochester at a tech writing place, you know, and she said, you had me at this line, could I be your agent? And I said, yeah, and she's been my agent ever since. Yeah. Esther Newberg, the greatest. But I mean, it does. You know, I tell my students that I got into art for mixed reasons. Some of it is just pure aesthetic bliss, and some of it is ego. You know, and I tell them it's all right actually. If you're somebody who is sort of wanting to accomplish, God bless you, and use that energy to do your stuff. The New Yorker thing just let me do everything at a higher level, you know, ever after you're a New Yorker writer. And the best part is to have a story that you're in private connection with. You go, I think it's working. Oh my God, it's working. Deborah says, it is working. And all she says, we're going to run that. That's the highest praise. We're going to run that. Then we work together like those two doctors, and it goes out into the world. And then you start hearing from people you haven't heard from in years. Best yet, you hear from somebody you don't know who you got. You know, you nailed this person. And they read the story beautifully. And so it's that feeling of having a way, even in this time, to go out into the world and reach like-minded people. And that's just an incredible experience, you know. It's the days after if it's a good story, the days after are really fun for an egomaniac, or for a serious artist, because you find out that there are people out there who are simpatico and who are every bit as smarter than you are, and are there to receive what you do, and that's just an incredible reviving of one's artistic love. You know.
So, one more question, and it's, I mean, it might not be totally appropriate, but we're among friends. So did she ever turn around and say, no, come back with another one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
last
okay.
month.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. No, this is part of what's so beautiful, is that you can't, you know, you can't coast. And even, of course, as artists, you never think you're coasting, but nevertheless, you sometimes are off. You know, you think your story's done when it needs 3 more months. So to have a reliable friend who will absolutely tell you. And it's funny, when I knew I was going to do this, I thought, I'm going to send her a story next month. I'm like, I wonder if she'll go a little easy on it. And I'm like, she won't. Thank God, you know, yeah.
So she just calls you. She doesn't write a fun rejection letter. I used to write rejection letters for
She
New
writes an
Westmead.
email rejection, but always very thoughtful. And sometimes, there's a story called Puppy, where she rejected it, and she said, it's a story of 2 women, and one of the women is working class and one is a little bit not. And she said very specifically, you're having way too much fun with the working class woman's voice, and it feels like you've got your finger on the scale. Oh, interesting. So I went back, and she said, why don't you try to dial that back by about 30%? All right. So I dialed it back, and that story got in the magazine. So often her notes are just super helpful in a way that a writer can hear, and that's kind of rare, you know.
Well, Richard went over. Hey, Richard, are you ready? Okay. So, George, you're going to go off.
Thank you for coming out. Good to see you.
But we're going to get back to him. I shouldn't say you're going to go off. I say thank you. And I'm going to tell you, this is what Deborah wrote, and then I'm going to get off the stage. The first story you're going to hear is a summer's reading by Bernard Malamud, which was published in The New Yorker in 1956. It features a dilemma that teenagers today can still identify with. A 19-year-old who hasn't been able to get a job, wants to spend his summer sitting around doing nothing, but at the same time wants to be admired by the people around him. Malamud was born in 1914, the son of Russian Jewish immigrants who had a deli in Brooklyn, and was the author of several story collections and 8 novels, one of which won the Pulitzer in 1967. Reading the story for us is Richard Kind, whom you will know from his roles in Mad About You, Spin City, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Only Murders in the Building. I forgot to mention that before, among others, and from his current work on Everybody's Live with John Mulaney. Please welcome Richard Kind. Oh, thank you.
Can everybody hear me? I will have to hold a microphone, and I'm not good at that. So I'm going to use my theater voice. If there's anybody who cannot hear me, even during the story, please say speak up. But I'm not going to stand here like this telling the story. I will also apologize if I'm doing this from an iPad, which I've never done before either. I know. So, if I happen to not scroll well, I could go to another page, just in case. A Summer's Reading by Bernard Mallett, written in 1956. George Stoyanovich was a neighborhood boy who had quit high school on an impulse when he was 16, and though he was ashamed whenever he went looking for a job and people asked him if he had finished school, he never went back. Now, this particular summer was a hard time for jobs, and he had none. Having so much time on his hands, George thought of going to summer school, but he decided the kids in his classes would be too young. He also considered registering in a night high school, but he didn't like the idea of teachers telling him what to do. He felt they had never respected him. And the result was he stayed in his room most of the day. He was close to 20, he had needs with the neighborhood girls, but no money of his own to spend, and he couldn't get much either because his father was poor, and his sister Sophie, a tall, bony girl of 23 who resembled George, earned very little. And what she had, she kept for herself. Their mother was dead, and Sophie had to take care of the house and work at her job as well. George's father got up very early in the morning to go to work at a fish market. And Sophie left at about 8 for a long ride in the subway. She worked in a cafeteria in the Bronx. George had his coffee by himself, and then he hung around in the house. Now, when the house, a 5-room railroad flat above a butcher store on the Lower East Side, got on his nerves, he cleaned it up, mopped the floors with a wet mop, and put things away, but most of the time, he sat in his room. In the afternoons, he usually listened to the ball games. Otherwise, he had a couple of old copies of the World Almanac, which he had bought long ago, and he liked to read them. Liked to read them and also to read the magazines and newspapers Sophie brought home, which had been left on the tables in the cafeteria. The magazines were mostly picture magazines about movie stars and sports figures, and the papers were generally the News and Mirror. Sophie herself read whatever fell into her hands, although she sometimes read good books. She once asked George what he did in his room all day, and he answered that he had read a lot too. Well, what besides the books that I bring home, she asked. Do you ever read any worthwhile books? Some, George answered, although he really didn't. He had tried to read a book or two that Sophie had in the house, but he'd found he was in no mood for them. Lately, he couldn't stand make-up stories. They got on his nerves. He wished he had some hobby to work at. As a kid, he'd been good at carpentry. Where could he work at? Sometimes he went for walks during the day, but mostly he did his walking after the sun had gone down, when it was cooler in the streets. In the evenings after supper, George left the house and wandered in the neighborhood. And during sultry spells, some of the storekeepers and their wives sat in chairs on the thick, cracked sidewalks in front of their shops, fanning themselves, and George walked past them, past the guys hanging out on the candy store corner. A couple of the guys he had known his whole life, but he and they never recognized each other. He had no special place to go, but usually, saving it for the last, he left the neighborhood and walked till he came to a darkly lit little park with benches and trees and a low iron railing, giving it a feeling of privacy. Stepped over the railing, sat on a bench, looked at the leafy trees and the flowers blooming inside the railing, and thinking of a better life for himself. Thought of the jobs he had had since he quit school. Delivery boy, stock clerk, runner, odd jobs in a factory. And he was dissatisfied with all of them. He felt he would someday like to have a good job, and live in a private house with a porch on a street with trees. He wanted to have dough in his pocket to buy things and a girl so as not to be so lonely, especially on Saturday nights. He wanted people to like and respect him. He thought about these things often, mostly when he was alone at night. Around midnight, he would get up, drift back to his hot, stony neighborhood. One time, on his loft, George met Mr. Catanzaro, coming home very late from work. He had wondered if Mr. Catanzaro was drunk, and then he saw that he wasn't. Mr. Catanzaro, a stocky, bald-headed man who worked in the change booth of an IRT station, lived on the block next to George's, above a shoe repair store. Nights, during the hot weather, he sat on his stoop in an undershirt reading the Times in the light from the shoemaker's window. He read it from the first page to the last, and then he went up to his flat to sleep. And all evening, while he was reading the paper, his wife, a fat woman with a white face, leaned out of the window above, looking into the street, her thick arms folded under her loose breasts on the window ledge. Once in a while, Mr. Catanzaro came home drunk, but he was always a quiet drunk. Never made any trouble, just walked stiffly up the street and slowly climbed the stoop and went into his doorway. He looked the same as always, except for the stiff walk and the fact that his eyes were sad. George liked him because he remembered Mr. Catanzaro giving him nickels to buy lemon ice when he was a squirt. Mr. Catanzaro was different from most of the people in the neighborhood. He asked different questions when he met him, and he seemed to know what went on in all the newspapers. "Oh, what you doing with yourself this summer, George?" Mr. Catanzaro asked that evening when they met. "I seen you walking around at night." George felt embarrassed. "I like to walk," he said. "Well, what are you doing in the day now?" "Nothing much just right now. I'm waiting for a job." And then, since it shamed him to admit he wasn't working, George said, "I'm staying home, but I'm reading a lot to pick up my education." Mr. Catanzaro looked interested. He mopped his hot face with a red handkerchief. "What are you reading?" George hesitated, and then he said, "No, I got a list of books in the library once, and now I decided to read them this summer." He felt strange and a little unhappy saying this, but he wanted Mr. Catanzaro to respect him. "Well, how many books are on it?" Mr. Catanzaro asked. I never counted them, maybe about 100. Mr. Catanzaro whistled. "Well, I figured if I did that, it would help me in my education," George went on earnestly. I don't mean the kind they give you in high school. I want to know different things that you learn there, if you know what I mean. Mr. Catanzaro nodded. "Still more. 100 books is a big load, just for one summer," he said. "Well, it might take longer." "Well, after you finish with some, maybe you and I can have a nice talk about them," said Mr. Catanzaro. "Yeah, when I'm finished." Mr. Catanzaro went home. George continued on his walk. After that night, George still did nothing different from the usual, though he had the urge to. He just took his walks at night, ending up at the little park. But one evening, the shoemaker from the next block stopped George and said he was a good boy. And George figured that Mr. Catanzaro had told him about all the books he was supposed to be reading. And from the shoemaker, the report must have gone down the street, because in the next few days, George saw a couple of people smiling kindly at him, though nobody spoke to him personally. He felt a little better around the neighborhood, and he liked it more, though not so much that he wouldn't want to live in it forever. You know, he never exactly disliked the people in it, yet he had never liked them very much either. Soon, to his surprise, George found that his father and Sophie had learned about his reading too. Now, his father was too shy to say anything about it, never been much of a talker his whole life, but Sophie was softer to George now. And she showed him in other ways that she was proud of him. And as the summer went on, George felt in a good mood about things. Cleaned his house every day as a favor to Sophie, and he enjoyed the ball games more. Sophie gave him $1 a week allowance, and though it still wasn't enough, he had to use it carefully. It was a lot better than the occasional 2 bits that he'd had before. He got a big kick out of what he bought with the money, cigarettes mostly, occasional beer or a movie ticket, and life wasn't so bad if you knew how to appreciate it. And once in a while, he bought a paperback book from a newsstand, but he never got around to reading it, though he was glad to have it, and a couple of others in his room. He still read Sophie's magazines and newspapers thoroughly. And night was the most enjoyable time now, because when he passed the storekeeper sitting out on the sidewalk, he could tell how highly they and their wives regarded him. He walked erect, and though he did not say much to them or they to him, he could feel approval on all sides. A couple of nights he felt so good that he skipped the park at the end of the walk, just wandered in the neighborhood where people had known from time to time that he was a kid just playing punch ball. He wandered there, then came home, got undressed for bed, feeling fine. The next few weeks after that one encounter, George talked only once with Mr. Catanzaro. The changemaker said nothing more about the books, asked no questions. But the fact that he didn't made George a little uneasy. For a while, George didn't pass in front of Mr. Catanzaro's house anymore. And then one night, forgetting himself, he approached it. The time was already past midnight. The street, except for 1 or 2 people, was deserted. And George was surprised when he saw Mr. Catanzaro still reading his newspaper. Now, George's impulse was to go up and talk to him. He wasn't sure what he wanted to say, but he felt the words would come when he began to talk. But the more he thought about it, the more the idea scared him. And he decided he better not. He even considered turning around, running home the other way, but he was already too near Mr. Catanzaro, and the changemaker might see him and get annoyed. So George unobtrusively crossed the street, trying to make it seem that he had to look in a store window on the other side, and then he just went on, uncomfortable at what he was doing. He feared Mr. Catanzaro would glance up from his paper, call him a dirty rat for walking on the other side of the street, but all the changemaker did was just sit there in his undershirt, his bald head shining in the dim light while he read his Times, and upstairs his fat wife leaned out the window, seeming to read the paper along with him. George thought she would spy him, yell out to Mr. Catanzaro. But she never moved her eyes from her husband. George made up his mind to stay away from Mr. Catanzaro until he had got some of his paperbacks book read. But when he started to read them, he found that they were all storybooks, and he lost interest in them. He lost interest in reading other things, too. Sophie's magazines and newspapers went unread. She saw them piled up in a chair in his room and asked why he was no longer looking at him. And George told her he was supposed all the other reading he had to do. And Sophie had said that she guessed that's what it was. So for most of the day, George had the radio on, turning to music when he was sick of the human voice. And he kept the house fairly neat. Sophie said nothing on the days when he neglected it. She was still kind, gave him his $1. But now things were not so good for him as they had been for a while. Things were good enough, considering. Also, George's night walks invariably picked him up, no matter how bad the day had been. Then one night, George saw Mr. Catanzaro coming down the street toward him. George was about to turn and run, but he recognized from Mr. Catanzaro's walk that he was drunk and thought that he would probably not even notice him. So George kept on walking until he and Mr. Catanzaro passed each other, Though George felt wound up enough to pop into the sky, he was not surprised when Mr. Catanzaro went on by without a word, walking slowly, his face and body stiff. George drew a breath in relief at his escape, and then he heard his name called. Then he stopped. There stood Mr. Catanzaro at his elbow, smelling like a ball. His eyes were sad, and George felt so intensely uncomfortable that he was tempted to shove him aside and continue on his walk, but he couldn't act that way. And besides, Mr. Catanzaro took a nickel out of his pants pocket and handed it to him. "Here, go buy yourself a lemon ice, George," he said. "It's not that time anymore, Mr. Catanzaro," George said. "I'm a big guy now." "No, you ain't," said Mr. Catanzaro. To this, George made no reply. "How are your books coming along now?" Mr. Catanzaro asked. Though he tried to stand steady, he swayed him. "Well, fine, I guess," said George, feeling redness crawl up his face. "You ain't sure?" The changemaker smiled slyly, in a way George had never seen him smile when he was sober. "Yeah, sure, said George. They're fine." Mr. Catanzaro's head swayed in the larks, but his eyes were steady. He had small blue eyes that hurt. He had looked at them too long. "George," he said, "name me one book on that list that you read this summer, and I will drink to yours." "I don't want anybody drinking to me," George said. "Name me one, so I can ask you a question on it. Who can tell if it's a good book? Maybe I might want to read it myself." George knew he looked the same as ever on the outside, but inside, he was crumbling. Unable to reply, he shut his eyes. When, years later, he opened them, he saw that Mr. Catanzaro had, out of pity, gone away. But still in George's ears were the words he had said as he left. "George, don't do what I did." The next night, George was afraid to leave his room. And though Sophie argued with him, he wouldn't open his door. "What are you doing in there?" she asked. "Nothing." "Aren't you reading?" "No." She was silent a minute, then asked, "Where do you keep the books you read? I've never seen any in your room outside a few cheap, trashy ones." He wouldn't tell her. "In that case, you're not worth a buck of my hard-earned money," she said. "Why should I break my poor back for you? Go out, you bum. Get a job." Stayed in his room for almost a week, except to eat. Sophie railed him, then begged him to come out, and his old father wept. George wouldn't budge. Though the weather was terrible, his small room stifled. He found it very hard to breathe. And one night, unable to stay in the heat anymore, he burst into the street at 1 a.m. He hoped to sneak to the park without being seen, but there were people all over the block, wilted and listless, waiting for a breeze. George lowered his eyes and walked, with disgrace, past them. But before long, he discovered they were still friendly to him. He figured Mr. Catanzaro hadn't told. Maybe when he woke up out of his drunk the next morning, he had forgotten about their meeting. George felt his confidence coming back. A little later, a man on the street corner asked him if it was true that he had finished reading so many books. George admitted that he had. The man said it was a wonderful thing for a boy his age to read so much. "Yeah," George said. And he felt relieved, but he hurried away. He hoped nobody would mention the books anymore. And when a couple of nights later he accidentally met Mr. Catanzara again, he did. One evening early in the fall, George ran out of the house and all the way to the library, where he hadn't been in years. There were books all over. Wherever he looked. And he thought he was struggling to control an invisible trembling, as well as an impulse to run home. He stayed and counted off 100.
This is tall, but Richard's tall. The next, let's see, Grace Paley. This is what, again, thank you, what Deborah Treisman wrote. Grace Paley, born in 1922, was, like Malamud, the child of Jewish immigrants, this time from Ukraine, and she grew up in the Bronx. A political activist, poet, essayist, and fiction writer, she published 9 books, including the story collection Enormous Changes at the Last Minute. In the story you'll hear now, My Father Addresses Me on the Facts of Old Age, we hear both her voice and her father's, spilling over with humor, intelligence, and sadness. Reading it is my friend, Kerry O'Malley, whose recent film roles include The Killer, Mea Culpa, and Nightbitch, and whose TV work includes Brotherhood, Boardwalk Empire, Shameless, and now filming A Man in the Inside. Please welcome Kerry O'Malley.
Hello. Can you hear me all? My father addresses me on the facts of old age. My father had decided to teach me how to grow old. I said, okay. My children didn't think it was such a great idea. If I knew how, they thought, I might do so too easily. No, I said, it's for later, years from now. And besides, if I get it right, it might be helpful to you kids in time to come. They said, really? My father wanted to begin as soon as possible. For God's sake, he said, you can talk to the kids later. Now listen to me. Send them out to play. You are so distractible. We should probably begin at the beginning, he said. Change. First, there is change, which nobody likes, even men. You'd be surprised. You can do little things, putting cream on the corners of your mouth, also the heels of your feet. But here is the main thing. Oh, I wish your mother was alive. Not that she had time. But Pa, I said, Mama never knew anything about cream. I did not say she was famous for not taking care. Forget it, he said sadly. But I must mention squinting. Don't squint. Wear your glasses. Look at your aunt, so beautiful once. I know someone has said men don't make passes at girls who wear glasses, but that's an idea for a foolish person. There are many handsome women who are not exactly 20/20. Please, sit down, he said. Be patient. The main thing is this. When you get up in the morning, you must take your heart in your 2 hands. You must do this every morning. That's a metaphor, right? Metaphor? No, you do this. In the morning, do a few exercises for the joints, not too much. Then, put your hands like a cup over and under the heart. Under the breast, he said tactfully. It's probably easier for a man. Then, talk softly. Don't yell. Under your ribs, push a little. When you wake up, you must do this massage. I mean, pat, stroke a little. Don't be ashamed. Very likely no one will be watching. Then you must talk to your heart. Talk? What? Say anything, but be respectful. Maybe say, heart, little heart. Beat softly, but never forget your job, the blood. You can whisper also, remember, remember. For instance, I said to it yesterday, heart, heart, do you remember my brother, Grisha? How he made work for you that day when he came to the store and he said, your boss's money, Zenya, right now. How he put a gun in my face and I said, Grisha, are you crazy? Why don't you ask me at home? I would give you. We were in this America, not even 2 years. He was only a kid. And he said, who needs your workers' money? For the movement, only from your boss. Oh, little heart, you worked like a bastard, like a dog, like a crazy slave. Bang, bang, bang that day, remember? That's the story I told my heart yesterday, my father said. What a racket it made to answer me. I remember till I was dizzy with the thumping. Why did you do that, Pa? I don't get it. Don't you see? This is good for the old heart to get excited, just as good as for the person. Some people go running till late in life. For the muscles, they say, but the heart knows the real purpose. The purpose is the expansion of the arteries, a river of blood. It cleans off the banks, carries junk out of the system. I myself would rather remind the heart how frightened I was by my brother than go running in some strange neighborhood miles and miles with the city so dangerous these days. I said, oh, but then I said, well, thanks. I don't think you listened, he said. As usual, probably worried about the kids. They're not babies, you know. If you were better organized, you wouldn't have so many worries. I stopped by a couple of weeks later. This time, he was annoyed. Why did you leave the kids at home? If you keep doing this, they'll forget who I am. Children are like old people in that respect. They won't forget you, Pa. Never in a million years. Oh, you think so? God has not been so good about a million years. His main interest in us began, actually, he put it down in writing, 5,700 years ago in the book. You know, our book, I suppose. Okay, yes. Probably a million years is too close to his lifetime, if you could call it life, what he goes through. I believe he said several times while he was still in contact with us, I am a jealous God. Here and there he makes an exception. I read there were 3,000-year-old trees somewhere in some godforsaken place. Of course, that's how come they're still alive. We should all be so godforsaken. But no more joking around. I have been thinking what to tell you now. First of all, soon, maybe in 20, 30 years, you'll begin to get up in the morning, 4, 5 a.m. In a farmer, that's okay, but for us, you'll remember everything you did, didn't, what you omitted, whom you insulted, betrayed. Betrayed. That is the worst. Do you remember? You didn't go see your aunt. She was dying. That will be on your mind like a stone. Of course, I myself did not behave so well. Still, I was so busy those days. Long office hours. Remember, it was usual in those days for doctors to make house calls. No elevators, 4th floor, 5th floor, even in a nice Bronx tenement. But this morning, a few hours ago, my mother, your babushka, came into my mind, looked at me. Have I told you I was arrested? Of course I did. I was arrested a few times, but this time, for some reason, the policeman walked me past the office of the local jail. My mama was there. I saw her through the window. She was bringing me a bundle of clean clothes. She put it on the office's table. She turned. She saw me. She looked at me through the glass with such a face, eye to eye. She looked at me, despair, no hope. This morning, 4 a.m., I saw once more how she sat there very straight, her eyes. Because of that look, I did my term, my sentence, the best I could. I finished up 6 months in Archangelisk, where they finally sent me. Then no more, I said to myself, no more saving Imperial Russia, the great pogrom maker, from itself. Oh, Pa, don't make too much out of everything. Well, anyway, I want to tell you also how the body is your enemy. I must warn you, it is not your friend the way it was when you were a youngster. For example, greens, believe me, are overrated. Some people believe they will cure cancer, it's the style. My experience with maybe 100 patients proves otherwise. Greens are helpful to God. That fella Sonnenberg, the poet, I believe from Chicago, he explained it. Grass tiptoes over the whole world, holds it in place. Except the desert, of course, where everything there is loose, flying around. How come you bring up God so much? When I was a kid, you were a strict atheist. You even spit on the steps of the synagogue. Well, God is very good for conversation, he said. By the way, I believe I have to tell you a few words about the stock market. Your brother-in-law is always talking about how brilliant he is investing. My advice to you, stay out of it. But people are making money a lot. Read the paper. Even kids are becoming millionaires. But what of tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow? I mean, they'll make another million. No. I mean, tomorrow. I was there when tomorrow came in 1929. So I say to them and their millions, ha, 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 tomorrow will come. Go home now. I have a great deal more to tell you. Sometimes I'm always tired. I'll go in a minute, but I have to tell you something, Pa. I had to tell him that my husband and I were separating. Maybe even divorce. The first in the family. What? What, are you crazy? I don't understand you people nowadays. I married your mother when I was a boy. It's true, I had a first-class mustache, but I was a kid. And you know, I stayed married till the end. Once or twice she wanted to part company, but not me. The reason, of course, she was inclined to be jealous. He then gave me the example I had heard 5 or 6 times before, what it was. One time, 2 couples went to the movies, Arzamich and his wife. You remember. Well, I sat next to his wife, the lady of the couple, by the way, a very attractive woman. And during the show, which wasn't so great, we talked about this and that, laughed a couple of times. When we got home, your mother said, "Okay, anytime you want, right now, I will give you a divorce. We will go our separate ways." Naturally, I said, "What, are you ridiculous?" My advice to you, stick it out. It's true, your husband, he's a peculiar fellow, but think it over. Go home. Maybe you can manage at least till old age. Then, if you still don't get along, you can go to separate old age homes. Pa, it's no joke, it's my life. It is a joke. A joke is necessary at this time. But I'm tired. You'll see in 30, 40 years from now, you'll get tired often. It doesn't mean you're sick. This is something important I am telling you. Listen, to live a long time, long years, you've got to sleep a certain extra percentage away. It's a shame. It was at least 3 weeks before I saw him again. He was drinking tea, eating a baked apple, one of 12 my sister baked for him every 10 days. I took another one out of the refrigerator. Fathers and Sons was on the kitchen table. Most of the time he read history. He kept Gibbon and Prescott on the lampstand next to his resting chair. But this time, thinking about Russia for some reason in a kindly way. He was reading Turgenev. "You were probably pretty busy," he said. "Where are the kids?" "With the father?" he said hopefully. "No hope, Pa." By the way, you know this fellow Turgenev? He wasn't a show-off. He wrote a certain book, and he became famous right away. One day he went to Paris, and in the evening he went to the opera. He stepped into his box, and just as he was sitting down, the people began to applaud. The whole opera house was clapping. He was known. Everybody knew his book. He said, "I see Russia is known in France." You're a lucky girl that these books are in the living room, more on the table than on the shelf. Yes. Excuse me, also, about Turgenev. I don't believe he was an anti-Semite. Of course, most of them were, even if they had brains. I don't think Gorky was. Gogol, probably. Tolstoy, no. Tolstoy had an opinion about the Mexican-American War. Did you know? Of course, most were anti-Semites. Dostoevsky. It was natural, it seems. Why is it we read them with such interest and they don't return the favor? That's what women writers say about men writers. Please don't start in. I'm in the middle of telling you some things you don't know. Well, I suppose you do know a number of Gentiles. You're more in the American world. I know very few. Still, I was telling you, Jews were not allowed to travel in Russia. I told you that. But a Jewish girl, if she was a prostitute, could go anywhere throughout all Russia. Also a Jew if he was a merchant, first class. Even people with big stores were only second class. Who else? A soldier who had a medal, I think St. George. Did you know nobody could arrest him, even if he was a Jew? If he killed someone, a policeman could not arrest him. He wore a certain hat. Why am I telling you this? Well, it is interesting. Yes, but I'm supposed to tell you a few things, give advice, a few last words. Of course, the fact is I'm obliged because you're always getting yourself mixed up in politics. Because your mother and I were such radical kids, socialists, in constant trouble with the police. It was 1904, 1905. You have the idea it's okay for you, and it is not okay in this country, which is a democracy. And you're running in the street like a fool. Your cousin saw you a few years ago in school, suspended, sitting with other children in the auditorium, not allowed to go to class. You thought Mama and I didn't know. Pa, that was 35 years ago, in high school. Anyway, what about Mama? You mentioned the Arzamich family. She was a dentist, wasn't she? Right? A very capable woman. Well, Mama probably felt bad about not getting to school and, becoming something, having a profession like Mrs. What's-Her-Name. I mean, she did run the whole house and family and the office and people coming to live with us, but she was sad about that, surely. He was quiet. Then he said, "You're right. It was a shame. Everything went into me, so I should go to school. I should graduate. I should be the doctor. I should have the profession." Poor woman, she was extremely smart. At least as smart as me. In Russia, in the movement, when we were youngsters, she was considered the more valuable person. Very steady, honest, made first-class contact with the workers, a real organizer. I could only be an intellectual. But maybe if life didn't pass so quick, speedy, like a winter day, short. Also she was very musical. She had perfect pitch. A few years ago, your sister made similar remarks to me about Mama, questioning me like history is my fault. Your brother only looked at me the way he does, not with complete approval. Then one day, my father surprised me. He said he wanted to talk a little, but not too much, about love or sex or whatever it's called. Its troubling persistence. He said, that might happen to me too, eventually. It should not be such a surprise. Then, a little accusingly, after all, I have been a man alone for many years. Did you ever think about that? Maybe I suffered. Did it even enter your mind? You're a grown-up woman after all. But Pa, I would never have thought of bringing up anything like that. You and Mama were so damn puritanical. I never heard you say the word sex till this day, either of you. We were serious socialists, he said. So, he looked at me, raising one nice thick eyebrow. You don't understand politics too well, do you? Actually, I had thought of it now and then, his sexual aloneness. I was a grown-up woman, but I turned it into a tactful question. Aren't you sometimes lonely, Pa? I have a nice apartment. Then he closed his eyes. He rested his talking self. I decided to water the plants. He opened one eye. Take it easy, don't overwater. Anyway, he said, only your mother, a person like her, could put up with me. Her patience. You know, I was always losing my temper. But finally with us, everything was all right. All right. Accomplished. Do you understand? Your brother and sister finished college, married. We had a beautiful grandchild. I was working very hard, like a dog. We were only 50 years old then. But look, we bought the place in the country. Your sister and your brother came often. You yourself were running around with a dozen kids in bathing suits all day. Your mama was planting all kinds of flowers every minute. Trees were growing. Your grandma, your babushka, sat on a good chair on the lawn. In back of her were birch trees. I put in a nice row of spruce. Then one day in the morning, she comes to me, my wife. She shows me a spot over her left breast. I know right away. I don't touch it, I see it. In my mind, I turn it this way and that. But I know in that 1 minute, everything is finished. Finished. Happiness, pleasure, finished. Years ahead. Black. No. That minute had been told to me a couple of years ago, maybe twice in 10 years. Every time, it nearly stopped my heart. No. He recovered from the telling. Now listen, this means, of course, that you should take care of yourself. I don't mean eat vegetables. I mean go to the doctor on time. Nowadays, a woman as sick as your mama could live many years. Your sister, for example, after terrible operations, heart bypass, colon cancer, more she probably hides from me. She's running around to theater, concerts, probably supports Lincoln Center, ballet, chamber, symphony, 3-4 times a week. But you must pay attention. One good thing, don't laugh, is bananas. Really, potassium. I myself eat one every day. But seriously, I'm running out of advice. It's too late to beg you to finish school, get a couple of degrees, a decent profession, be a little more strict with the children. They should be prepared for their future. Maybe they won't be as lucky as you. Well, no more advice. I restrain myself. Now, I'm changing the whole subject. I will ask you a favor. You have many friends, teachers, writers, intelligent people, Jews, non-Jews. These days, I think often, especially after telling you the story a couple of months ago about my brother Grisha. I want to know what happened to him. I guess we know he was deported around 1922, right? Yes, but why did they go after him? The last 10 years before that, he calmed down quite a bit. He had a nice job, I think. But that's what they did you know? Even after the Palmer raids, that was maybe 1919, they kept deporting people. They picked them up at home, at the Russian Artists Club, at meetings. Of course, you weren't even around yet, maybe just born. They thought that these kids had in mind a big revolution, like in Russia, some joke. Ignorance. Grisha and his friends didn't like Lenin from the beginning. More Bakunin. Emma Goldman, her boyfriend, I forgot his name. Berkman. Right. They were shipped, I believe, to Vladivostok. There must be a file somewhere. Archives salted away. Why did they go after him? Maybe they were mostly Jews, anti-Semitism in the American blood from Europe, a little thinner, I suppose. But why didn't we talk? All the years not talking. Me seeing sick people day and night, strangers, and not talking to my brother till all of a sudden he's on a ship, gone. Go home now, I don't have much more to tell you. Anyway, it's late. I have to prepare now all of my courage, not for sleep, for waking in the early morning, maybe 3 or 4 a.m. I have to be ready for them, my morning visitors, your babushka, your mama. Most of all, to tell the truth, it's for your aunt, my sister, the youngest. She said to me that day in the hospital, "Don't leave me here. Take me home to die." And I didn't. And her face looked at me that day, and many, many mornings looks at me still. I stood near the door holding my coat, a space at last for me to say something. My mouth open. "Enough already," he said. "I had the job to tell you how to take care of yourself, what to expect. About the heart, you know, it was not a metaphor. But in the end, a great thing, a really interesting thing, would be to find out what happened to Grisha. You're smart, you can do it. Also, you'll see, you'll be lucky in this life to have something you must do to take your mind off all the things you didn't do." Then he said, "I suppose that's something like a joke. But, my dear girl, very serious."
Thanks. The next story is kind of a modern classic, one that other writers often refer to. At the same time, it's a perfect revenge story against critics. Bullet in the Brain was written by Tobias Wolff, a memoirist and fiction writer whose best-known works include This Boy's Life, In Pharaoh's Army, and Old School. This was his first story published in The New Yorker back in 1995. The story will be read for us by Jon Cryer, who, for my generation, and this is written by Deborah, who's maybe just a little bit younger, but I speak for Deborah, is indelible as Ducky and John Hughes' Pretty in Pink, and went on from there to become one of the complete men in the sitcom 2.5 Men. And Lex Luthor, I forgot to say, in Supergirl, among many other things. Please welcome Jon Cryer.
Thank you. Oh. Okay, fantastic. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. I will not use my theater voice because I'm no Richard Kind, as he reminds me often. Okay, let's see if we can get some light on this? Okay. Bullet in the Brain by Tobias Wolff, 1995. The line was endless. Anders couldn't get to the bank till just before it closed, and now he was stuck behind two women whose loud, stupid conversation put him in a murderous temper. He was never in the best of tempers anyway. Anders, a book critic known for the weary, elegant savagery with which he dispatched almost everything he reviewed. With the line still doubled around the rope, one of the tellers struck a position closed sign in her window and walked to the back of the bank, where she leaned against a desk and began to pass the time with a man shuffling papers. The woman in front of Anders broke off their conversation and watched the teller with hatred. "Oh, that's nice," one of them said. She turned to Anders and added, confident of his accord, "One of those little human touches that keeps us coming back." Anders had conceived his own towering hatred of the teller, but he immediately turned it on the presumptuous crybaby in front of him. "Damned unfair," he said. "Tragic, really, if they're not chopping off the wrong leg or bombing your ancestral village, they're closing their positions." She stood her ground. "Well, I didn't say it was tragic," she said. I think it's pretty lousy. It's a pretty lousy way to treat your customers." "Oh, unforgivable," Anders said. "Heaven will take note." She sucked in her cheeks, but stared past him and said nothing. Anders saw that the other woman, her friend, was looking on in the same direction, and then the tellers stopped what they were doing, and the customers slowly turned, and the silence came over the bank. Two men wearing black ski masks and blue business suits were standing in the side of the door. One of them had a pistol pressed against the guard's neck. The guard's eyes were closed, and his lips were moving. The other man had a sawed-off shotgun. "Keep your big mouth shut," the man with the pistol said, though no one had spoken a word. "One of you tellers hits the alarm, and you are all dead meat. Got it?" The tellers nodded. "Oh, bravo," Anders said. "Dead meat." He turned to the women in front of him. "Oh, great script, eh? The stern, brass-knuckled poetry of the dangerous classes." She looked at him with drowning eyes. The man with the shotgun pushed the guard to his knees. He handed the shotgun to his partner and yanked the guard's wrist up behind his back and locked them together with a pair of handcuffs. He then toppled him onto the floor with a kick between the shoulder blades. He took his shotgun back and went over to the security gate at the end of the counter. He was short and heavy and moved with peculiar slowness, even torpor. "Buzz him in," his partner said. The man with the shotgun sauntered along the lines of tellers, handing each of them a hefty bag. When he came back to the empty position, he looked over the man with the pistol and said, "Whose slot is this?" Anders watched the teller. She put her hand to her throat and turned to the man that she had been talking to. He nodded. "Mine," she said. "Then get your ugly ass in gear and fill that bag." "Oh, there you go," Anders said to the woman in the front of him. "Justice is done." Hey, bright boy, did I tell you to talk?" "Oh, no," Anders said. "Then shut your trap." "Oh, did you hear that?" Anders said. "Bright boy." It was right out of The Killers. "Please be quiet," the woman said. Hey, are you deaf or what?" The man with the pistol walked over to Anders. He poked the weapon under Anders' gut. "You think I'm playing games?" "No," Anders said. But the barrel tickled like a stiff finger, and he had to fight back the titters. He did this by making himself stare into the man's eyes, which were clearly visible behind the holes in his mask, pale blue and rawly red-rimmed. The man's left eyelid kept twitching. He breathed out a piercing, ammoniac smell that shocked Anders more than anything that had happened, and he was beginning to develop a sense of unease when the man prodded him again with the pistol. "You like me, bright boy?" he said. "You want to suck my dick?" "No," Anders said. "Then stop looking at me." Anders fixed his gaze on the man's shiny wingtip shoes. "No, not down there, up there." He struck the pistol under Anders' chin and pushed it upward until Anders was looking at the ceiling. Anders had never really paid much attention to that part of the bank, a pompous old building with marble floors and counters and pillars and gilt scrollwork over the tellers' cages. The domed ceiling had been decorated with mythological figures whose fleshy, toga-draped ugliness Anders had taken in at a glance many years earlier and afterward declined to notice. Now he had no choice but to scrutinize the painter's work. It was worse than he remembered, and all of it executed with the utmost gravity. The artist had a few tricks up his sleeve and used them again and again. A certain rosy blush on the underside of the clouds, a coy backward glance on the faces of the cupids and fawns. The ceiling was crowded with various dramas, but the one that caught Anders' eye was Zeus and Europa, portrayed in this rendition as a bull ogling a cow from behind a haystack. To make the cow sexy, the painter had canted her hips suggestively and given her long, droopy eyelashes, through which she gazed back at the bull with sultry welcome. The bull wore a smirk and his eyebrows were arched. If there had been a bubble coming out of his mouth, it would have said, hubba hubba. Hey, what's so funny, bright boy? Nothing. Oh, you think I'm comical? You think I'm some kind of clown? No. Oh, you think you can fuck with me? No. Fuck with me again, and you are history, capiche? Anders burst out laughing. He covered his mouth with both hands and said, I am sorry, I'm sorry. Then snorted helplessly through his fingers and said, capiche? Oh God, capiche? And at that, the man with the pistol raised the pistol and shot Anders right in the head. The bullet smashed Anders' skull and plowed through his brain and exited behind the right ear, scattering shards of bone into the cerebral cortex, the corpus callosum, back toward the basal ganglia, and down through the thalamus. But before all this occurred, the first appearance of the bullet in the cerebrum set off a crackling chain of ion transports and neurotransmissions. Because of their peculiar origin, they traced a peculiar pattern, flukishly calling to life a summer afternoon some 40 years past, and long since lost to memory. After striking the cranium, the bullet was moving at 900 feet per second, a pathetically sluggish glacial pace compared with the synaptic lightning that had flashed around it. Once in the brain, that is, the bullet came under the mediation of brain time, which gave Anders plenty of leisure to contemplate the scene that, in a phrase he would have abhorred, passed before his eyes. It is worth noting what Anders did not remember, given what he did remember. He did not remember his first lover, Sherry, or what he had most madly loved about her, before it became to irritate him. Her unembarrassed carnality, and especially the cordial way she had with his unit, which she called Mr. Mole, as in, uh-oh, looks like Mr. Mole wants to play, and let's hide Mr. Mole. Anders did not remember his wife, whom he had loved before she exhausted him with her predictability, or his daughter, now a sullen professor of economics at Dartmouth. He did not remember standing just outside his daughter's door as she lectured her bear about his naughtiness and described the truly appalling punishments Paws would receive unless he changed his ways. He did not remember a single line of the hundreds of poems he committed to memory in his youth, so that he could give himself the shivers at will. Not Silent Upon a Peak at Darien, or My God, I Heard This Day, or All My Pretty Ones, Did You Say All? Oh, Hellkite, all? None of these did he remember, not one. Anders did not remember his dying mother saying to his father, I should have stabbed him in his sleep. He did not remember Professor Josephs telling his class how the Spartans had released Athenian prisoners from their mines if they could recite Aeschylus, and then reciting Aeschylus himself right there in the Greek. Anders did not remember how his eyes had burned at those sounds. He did not remember the surprise of seeing a college classmate's name on the jacket of a novel not long after they graduated, or the respect he had felt after reading the book. He did not remember the pleasure of giving respect. Nor did Anders remember seeing a woman leap to her death from the building opposite his own, just days after his daughter was born. He did not remember shouting, Lord, have mercy. He did not remember deliberately crashing his father's car into a tree, or having his ribs kicked in by 3 policemen at an anti-war rally, or waking himself up with laughter. He did not remember when he began to regard the heap of books on his desk with boredom and dread, and when he grew angry at writers for writing them. He did not remember when everything began to remind him of something else. This is what he remembered: heat, a baseball field, yellow grass, the whir of insects, himself leaning against a tree as the boys of the neighborhood gather for a pickup game. The captains, precociously large boys named Burns and Drash, argue the relative genius of Mantle and Mays. They have been worrying this subject all summer, and it has become tedious to Anders, an oppression, like the heat. Then the last two boys arrive, Coyle and a cousin of his from Mississippi. Anders has never met Coyle's cousin before and will never see him again. He says hi with the rest, but takes no further notice of him until they've chosen sides, and Darsh asks the cousin what position he wants to play. "Shortstop," the boy says. "Short's the best position they is." Anders turns and looks at him. He wants to hear Coyle's cousin repeat what he's just said, but he knows better than to ask. The others will think he's being a jerk, ragging the kid for his grammar. But that isn't it, not at all. It's that Anders is strangely roused, elated by those final two words, their pure unexpectedness and their music. He takes the field in a trance, repeating them to himself. The bullet is already in the brain. It won't be outrun forever, or charmed to a halt. In the end, it will do its work and leave the troubled skull behind, dragging its comet's tail of memory and hope and talent and love into the marble hall of commerce. That can't be helped. But for now, Anders can still make time. The time for the shadows to lengthen on the grass, time for the tethered dog to bark at a flying ball, time for the boy in right field to smack his sweat-blackened mitt and softly chant, "They is, they is, they is."
Thank you, everybody. Deborah will be here soon, but and if you want to hang around, she'll be here to sign books, and you can say hi and everything. It's a pity she missed this because Richard Kind, Kerry O'Malley, and Jon Cryer. I mean, and oh yeah, George Saunders. So thank you so much. Feel free to loiter in the lobby, and we'll see you soon.